Welcome to the Be on the Move podcast, hosted by Andrew Ronquetto. Through thoughtful conversations, we explore how innovation fuels growth for humanity, uncovering the stories and ideas that shape lasting impact. And now your host, Andrew Ronquetto.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Be on the Move. I'm your host, Andrew, and I'm going to be honest with you today. This episode generally drops a little earlier in the week than it has, and we're a little bit late with it. But you know what? Life happens, and if there's ever been a topic that reminds us of why balance and flexibility matter, it is the one we're talking about today. So I hope you stick with us because we're going to talk a little bit about burnout. I know it personally. I've been there. I know what it means to still be on a path of recovery related to it. And so it's a very personal thing for me, and it's one I really didn't appreciate. But honestly, the thing is partly what happens is if you've been feeling this weight of everything around you, work and life and responsibilities and expectations, I know I'm not alone, because whether you're leading a team or managing a household or trying to keep up with everything, what burnout is and what it does is it creeps in when we're constantly running on this whole concept of empty. And I don't mean just empty in terms of whether we're eating right or whether we get enough sleep. I mean just this concept of empty in our energy. So what we're going to do today is slow it down a little bit. We're going to take a breath. I know I need one. It's been a long week. I'm really excited about my week and everything that happened in it. But I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about burnout and how we can recognize it before it just takes over. Because like I said, when it hit me and it was like a freight train, it really took a lot for me to step back, rethink, and come back to a balance in life. And that's the thing you got to realize is building, on your life is actually important from the perspective of creating things that can support your well-being instead of drain it, create that energy that we're talking about. And I hope as we go through this conversation, most importantly, don't feel guilty because one, you're not alone. And partly why we're talking about it is because you're not alone. Sometimes we just don't hear about it because the conversation's difficult. It makes us feel vulnerable. But the point is I hope you don't feel guilty about this, especially within your life. I hope you stick with me because it's real. And I think there are some practical ways that we can reset it in our life or start to reset things in our life and really move forward. So this is about taking care of yourself, and it's not an afterthought. And it's really essential. I've learned that, like I said, so let's dive into it. And the first thing I really think we got to talk about is, what is it? What is burnout? And it is not, like I was talking about a moment ago, this idea of feeling tired. It's a lot deeper than that. It's exhaustion, but it doesn't go away with sleep. It's this feeling of being disconnected from the things that you care about. And I feel that, like, when I was really in the midst of it, now reflecting, hindsight's 2020, I would finish up work at the end of the day and it'd be time to go out and spend time with those, closest to me in my life. And I just felt like I wasn't there. Like, have you ever felt that way where you just didn't feel like you were done with work, even though you weren't thinking about it or trying to think about it, but you just couldn't connect with the people around you, whether it was going to dinner or whatnot, or seeing a movie or being outside at the park? You just felt disconnected from the things that you care most about. This aspect of how it brings you down or starts to drag you down through your day, not because you're lazy, not because, you're struggling because of pressures at work, but just because your mind and your body, they're just done. And that is burnout. The thing is, like I said, I've felt it. I've been in that moment, man, more than once. And it's not just frustrating for you. It's obviously, it materializes in frustration from others because they're like, well, you're not present. You're not here. And it's like, yeah, you're not. And that is a very tall sign to say, hey, I need to do something about this. The thing is, and this is crazy, this number is sky high. I mean, it's 70+% of people, in their jobs alone experience burnout. I mean, it's real. Like that's the job side of it. But we've been talking about, our personal lives as well. And it's not just about work. So it happens, in our friendships. It happens in parenting and in caregiving and trying to be everything for everyone. Whether you're a middle manager and you're caught up between the pressures from leadership and the needs of your team, if you're an executive listening to this and you're carrying the weight of the entire organization on your shoulders, or just a parent, you're trying to balance 10,000, the million things. I know that personally, and still wondering if you've done enough to help your kids, to make sure they're ready for the next day. I mean, all of this has got to be personal for you. And the crazy thing with it is burnout is sneaky. It's sneaking in all these different facets of our life, and it doesn't hit us all at once. It builds over time. And if we can catch it early, I think that's the key thing here. If we can catch it early and we can help avoid the serious tolls that it can take on our health and our relationships and our happiness, I think that is the opportunity here. We don't have to go negative on everything. You might be starting to think about it in your life as we're going through this conversation and talking about what burnout is. Because like I said, it's not just about being sleepy. I mean, there are days I would sleep for 12 hours and still feel like I couldn't get things done that I needed to. So that mind-body disconnect and that I'm just done and that feeling where you can't be present for others that are important in your life are all aspects of how burnout materializes and how it builds up over time. And for myself, a lot of the stress, and I'll say the burnout that ultimately materialized for me in rethinking where I was going and what I was doing in life, came from just a buildup over years and years of experience. And I just didn't see it. And even though other people did, and they were telling me about it and saying, hey, you got to slow down, I just wasn't there. There were warning signs for them. But the thing is, and this is the thing I think that's most important for you personally, it's not like burnout announces itself. There's no warning light or a check engine light that says, hey, there's something wrong here. No, it sneaks up on you. And one day you could be fine. And the next day, everything on your list is just a foreign language to you. You just don't want to get it done. You don't want to get out of bed. And that's crazy if you think about it, because it's like the flick of a switch. And you're like, wait a second. How did I go from yesterday just blazing through life to just all of a sudden screeching halt? And there's lots of ways that it can start to materialize itself. So I want to throw some of these out there, because as I even was preparing for this episode, I was like, oh boy, maybe I should take this on a little bit more, be more conscious of some of these things that are happening. Physically, for example, burnout can start to show itself in the early stages. And this is just high level. So I think, one thing to preface before I go into all of this is, this isn't me being an expert, but talking through what I understand and from what I've read. But, physically, burnout can start to materialize itself like in headaches, or if you can't sleep at night, your mind is constantly running. Or if you wake up in the morning and you just feel drained, or you're halfway through the day and you just don't feel like there's no amount of rest you could get that would help you finish the rest of the day. That's physically how it sometimes materializes itself. Emotionally, that sense of irritability that you might have, or that feeling of just being numb to the situation that you're in, or the fact that you might just be overwhelmed. That in itself could show itself as you procrastinating more to get something done, or zoning out in meetings, or just avoiding people that you would normally be around because they bring joy in your life. These are all things that can materialize or show burnout creeping in, so to say, from an emotional perspective. And the tough thing for all of us, is burnout can look like it's just going to push through and it doesn't matter what you do. So we sometimes kind of convince ourselves that in those moments where I might have a headache, or I got just the list is piling on, we need to work harder and we need to be tougher and we need to keep going. And the thing is it's really a trap. It's like the the epitome of burnout saying, okay, I'm coming, so I need you to do more to get me right in there. It's a trap. And we ignore it because mentally we're just conditioned to this idea of pushing through, and it makes it worse and it gets worse. So here's the thing. I'm going to tell a personal story in here. Is for the longest time, I have just looked to blaze trails. And I felt like I was pretty good at it, and feedback from others would say the same. Just the ability to go after it 1,000%, so to say. But over time, 4, 5, 10 years of doing that, it kind of got to this point where it's like I could start the next project and really just make it happen. But things started to just feel numb to me in the sense of I could get the work done and I was excited about the work, so to say, because of what it was and how that leads back to the things that are important in my life. So let's not say that it's a distraction from the things I find meaningful, the things that bring my authenticity out or give me energy. But there were the aspects of the day to day that just started to feel less exciting. Not the work itself, but aspects of the work around it, so to say, the tangential items. And I think what it materialized itself for me in is I just started to like double down more and work on all of those items. People started to notice. Like they would ask me, am I doing okay? Whether it was bags under my eyes, whether it was me just maybe being a little bit more irritable. And I would just kind of shrug it off, push it off. And finally, it came to a point where I couldn't shrug it off or push it off. And it materialized itself in meetings to the point where I needed to step away and just really decompress. And I didn't at the time appreciate that it was burnout. I thought it was something different, something that I was just struggling with mentally or emotionally. But really, it was my body trying to articulate to me, you're going too hard, you're going too fast. And I had already moved past that breaking point. And even with taking time off or even a short amount of time to I'll say, try to start the process of recovery, it wasn't enough for me to pivot and avoid what eventually kept deciding to creep back in. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I mean, there's a lot packed into that short story, and hopefully it makes sense because I still would say I'm processing it today in some ways as I continue through my own recovery, not in a negative way, but this idea that burnout was really the key source of something much deeper in me, and it requires a lot more attention in my life than I was ever giving it before because I just didn't understand what it was. And that's what we want to avoid. Why we're talking about it today, that sometimes that lack of understanding of what something is could be the very point or ability for us to do something more about it. And I'm sure that you can appreciate it. So what I want to talk about is if you're already past that point, or you feel like you're coming up on that point, you might have the headaches, or you might feel the procrastination at work or in the things that you're doing. What I want to talk about is what you can do when those signs start to show up, when like burnout starts to hit and say, double down, get it all done. First and foremost, I just want to throw it out there. You don't have to power through it. Just stop. This is coming from a guy who powered through it for the longest time. You don't have to power through it. You don't have to be tough. You don't have to just deal with it. By starting from that point and realizing that is the most important thing, your own personal recovery is possible. And it's because of that you're actually taking the first step of acknowledgement and saying that you don't need to power through, that your recovery can be intentional. So I think part of this is looking at how burnout kind of and the recovery around it can really come together in 3 phases. One is recognition. This idea that you are burnt out. I mean, it sounds simple, but we're just talking about all the ways that burnout can materialize in our life. So recognizing this means that we're honest with ourselves, means that we're honest with others, and that we're saying, I'm not fine with where I'm at. That's the first one. The second one for me is around this idea of reevaluate. And reevaluate for me is looking at everything in your life. And this is a big one. It's about the workload at home. It's about the workload at work, looking at your priorities, looking at your boundaries, and really just asking yourself, am I doing too much? What can I delegate? What can I let go? And good Lord, as I'm saying this, I'm picturing my managers and my partners that I've worked with have said the same thing to me over and over again. And I just wasn't picking up on it. Almost as I was missing this idea because I hadn't done the first thing, which was recognized I was burned out. So I wasn't able to take the second step of reevaluating, but understanding where I'm willing to say yes or where you're willing to say yes, and then really prioritize things and be willing to say no. That's the second step. So the first step being this whole idea of recognizing, the second step being about reevaluating. And once you've reevaluated and you've aligned further your priorities and understood what you're going to say yes and no to, that's where we can get to the third item. And the third item is what I would call recharge. Now, recharge is about creating small, consistent practices that can help you refuel. And I talk a lot about practices. It really is about how we bring ourselves forth in our lives to others and materialize the things that we need to get done. In the time that we have, the energy we have day to day, how much of that is, say, rejuvenated through sleep or through food or what we drink, water, tea, etc., but rejuvenating our energy and pushing that positive aspect in there. Sometimes we don't do that enough. To then the part where we start to leverage our energy, whether it's making lunch and dinner for our family, or it is going to work. Work is a big part of that for folks, or if it's working out, or if it's social, or if it's learning new habits. So really looking deep into your habits to recharge yourself throughout the day. This could be walks. This could be introducing those as practices, like you wake up in the morning and you go for a walk, or it could be about waking up and taking deep breaths or taking a cold shower. I mean, there's lots of things we could do, and it's not just about physical elements. It's about how we're starting to introduce different things into our day that can help us recharge. So it's about recognizing, it's about reevaluating, and then it is about recharging ourselves and building those habits, those practices into our day-to-day to help us start to address burnout, whether we're in the middle of it or we're, right on the precipice of it. Wherever you might be, it's about starting with you at that point. And because I brought up this whole topic about practices, I want to talk about micro practices and habits, because the truth is, it isn't about taking these extreme steps to move out of burnout. You don't need to quit your job or move to a remote island, although, I mean, white sandy beaches could be pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. And I'd love to do that every day. But you don't have to do those types of extreme things. I think sometimes we do that because we're already over the edge. So introducing these micro habits, like we were talking about, these micro practices into our day, can help create the tiny shifts we need to in order to be successful here. And this is the thing that I want you to take away. You're at work, for example, and you're feeling it. Maybe you got the headache. Before you jump into that next meeting, go take 3 short breaths. And I've got a gentleman, a guest, who will share his episode here not too long from now, where he talks about breathing. And I do a live example on the show with him about breathing techniques. And I flabbergasted. I was amazed by it. So I'm really excited to share that with you. But the simple act of breathing can help reduce burnout. Maybe it's like setting a 1-minute timer where you just sit there in silence. If we ended this episode and we left some music on for you, I think we're going to do it, but we left some music on for you and you just got to sit there listening to that music. That 1-minute timer can just be enough, that silence in there, to help us recharge. That micro habit can be a big thing for us. And honestly, you got to just find ways to give yourself permission to step away and not feel guilty about it, to just be free of the guilt, to rest, to reward yourself because it's necessary. So I've been talking about like what it is. I've been talking about like how it materializes itself. I've been talking about how we can like work through it. I've been talking about like how we work through it in some very tactical ways, like listen to music and just being there in silence even, or breathing exercises. But all of this for me really comes down to how we help ourselves avoid burnout creeping back into our life. So there's some things you can take from this is if you don't have burnout in your life and you found a way to really keep it out of your life, I applaud you. If there are folks out there listening to this, they're like, okay, I'm feeling it based on everything you've been talking about. One of the things I'm going to tell you to do is just go schedule some intentional downtime for yourself. And it doesn't need to be a vacation. Like put it into your schedule where you just stop and refresh. Those daily moments. I talk about this and we talk about it in our platform about digital detox moments, in part because we just want to set the phone down. We don't want it next to us at the table while we're having dinner. It's those daily moments where we can just take a breath and do it for 5 minutes to help you reset between calls or at lunchtime, just a way that you're not sitting at your desk eating your lunch and answering emails, but taking the moment for yourself to be with your friends, to be with your colleagues, your workers, your family, and enjoy it. You cannot go at 110% every single day. You will crash. It may not be today. The human body is super resilient. We are all resilient in many different ways, shapes, and forms. But the point is, resiliency does have a breaking point. And so we need to back ourselves away from the 110%. It's fine to give 100%, but also recognize life happens. We're human. It took 15 extra minutes to get to work in the morning. Accounting for those types of nuances in our life are critical to helping us evaluate how we can be more conscious of the things that introduce stress into our life and then therefore doing something about it. So it's not just about doing it all. It's not just about creating sustainable ways. It's also about creating this culture of care and support around yourself so you can manage it. It can be checking in with yourself or with your friends, your family, your significant others as a means of decompressing. It can be focusing on it, not just because like a deadline. So every 2 weeks, we're going to check in and see how you're doing. I think it can be an in the moment thing as well. Tell us how you're really feeling, not just on what you're doing, but how you're doing related to it. And the last thing I'm going to leave here is honestly, for us to stop wearing the exhaustion as a badge of honor. I've done it for too long. I know there are others of you listening to this that wear that badge of exhaustion as this way of saying, yeah, I'm strong. I got this. But the thing is it's not worth sacrificing yourself. And I know that. I had got to the point where I was sacrificing other things in my life for that badge, and it wasn't good. So as we're wrapping up here, finishing this episode, I just want to ask you to do one thing. Like we did the last time, find one small thing, a new practice, a micro habit that you can do today or start doing today for yourself to prevent yourself from getting to that point of exhaustion. Maybe reduce the headaches if you got them, or maybe reduce the procrastination and really focus on what burnout is, because it's a sneaky little guy. And I'll be honest with you, once it hits you, it's a freight train and we really need to work on it. So find the one thing that you can do today or tomorrow, introduce into your practices to help you pull away from the burnout cliff. Whatever it might be, all I'm saying is do something to say no more and take that weight off yourself, remove that badge and tell it that you're not going to fail because you're focusing on burnout. You will fail if burnout continues to push forward in your life. And recognizing that you're human is a good thing. The reality of this is once you start to move past it, I know myself being 2 years later here from the point where it hit me like a freight train is I love my life. It's not exactly where I want it to be. That's the nature of life, but I am happy about it because I'm doing these things and I'm introducing these practices and I'm being conscious about it in my life. And hence where I started this. We didn't get this podcast out earlier this week like we normally would. And it's about recognizing and being okay that sometimes that's just what needs to happen. So I'll leave you with that. Take that small intentional step. Come back to yourself. I hope it resonated with you. It does resonate with me because it's very close to something that I've had to deal with in life and didn't fully appreciate what it is. If you want to reach out, do so, find that support, create new balances in your life, and do it with others, because the last thing I'll say is community helps. So take care, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Be on the Move. Don't forget to follow us, rate the show, and share with others. If you're ready to dive deeper, visit us at beyondplatform.com. Catch you next time.